know that ovarian factors can cause problems ranging from right from early puberty to late puberty to anovulation to hyperandrogenism, and they are very important from a pediatric endocrine perspective. The ovarian physiology, and when we talk about ovarian physiology, we are talking about two basic things. One is the fundamental process through which the ovarian steroids, the estrogens are produced, and then with regards to the cyclical changes which happen, and both are important in that perspective. So when you talk about ovary, what are the two fundamental functions of ovary, Sayan?
One is secretion of estrogen, and the other is for fertility oocytes.
So basically, if we talk about that, we're talking about two major things. One is the steroidogenic pathway producing estrogen and the oocyte, and these two are the very important thing. How is ovarian unit different from a testicular unit in that perspective? When you talk about testis and ovary, testis also does the same thing, steroidogenesis and spermatogenesis. But there is a fundamental difference between ovary and testis. That is?
There are various subunits in the ovary which function at a specific point of time and then go iterative.
So as against the testis, which is the entirely the unit, and you need to have the whole testis functional, in ovary a small region is active. So in a way that essentially what we're talking about is the follicle, which is the major region. When we talk about follicle, it has got the oocyte, which is the germ cell, which is surrounded by the granulosa cells on top of that, and then you have the theca cells. The theca cells, which are on the periphery, will be producing androstenedione, which will then be shunted towards the granulosa cell, which will convert it into estradiol, and they will then convert it into the oocyte, which will basically have all the functions in that regards. In testis, you've got different Leydig cells, which are basically equivalent to the theca cells. You've got Sertoli cells, which are equivalent to the granulosa cells, which are surrounding the germ cells. So it's similar. So even in testis, we say the Sertoli cells are surrounding the germ cells, but that is like a cord structure. In ovary, each follicle is an individual unit. So steroidogenic defects like star defect will have a global impact on the testis, because testis, everybody is continuously acting in terms of steroid synthesis. In ovary, only one follicle is doing that. So one follicle will be damaged at a time. Another cycle, it will start working. So manifestations of the same disorder will vary. In star defect, you will have severe testicular deficiency right in the beginning because of the two-hit model. In ovary, it will take time. And over time, you will develop this problem in that perspective. Now, what is the role of these granulosa cells other than estrogen production?
So they also produce AMH.
They produce AMH. So they're like other functional role. But other than those functional role, what are the other thing doing? If you see this structure and you compare this to testis, do you have got similar things happening in testis as well?
So they are protecting the germ cells.
Very importantly. So, sit down. So we know that germ cells are huge in numbers, and evolution has to select only a specific number. So fittest has to survive. This is the whole concept when we talk about all the ovulatory functions and all that regards. So from there, of the millions of oocytes, there will be few hundred which will actually be ovulating. So how do you select that? As soon as the oocyte comes into the ovary, if it does not enter meiosis, it is apoptose. It is not good enough. If it is unable to get a granulosa cell layer around it, it is apoptose. It's gone. So these two are basic capabilities which are there with regards to the ovarian function, which they need to have in that perspective. Now from there on, the next thing you need to have is estrogen exposure. If there is no estrogen exposure, both theca and granulosa cells will be lost. And this is very important. So if you have somebody who has aromatase deficiency, what do you expect their follicular function? Manoj.
Initial follicular should be there. After that.
So this is a very important point. We have seen individuals who presented to us with aromatase deficiency at a late stage, around puberty. Their follicles are already gone because you need estrogen to sustain. So it's like a auto-regulatory pathway. But now the question is, if you have a newborn, now we also have a newborn in that setting in whom there is a aromatase deficiency. Now whether giving systemic estrogen will help or not is a question. because this estrogen becomes important. So what is important from this perspective is that this is the basic structure that you have to look into and go from that perspective in that regards. And this is what we're going to focus on in that situation. And we all know that the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis is there, which is the most important determinant, Naveen, of the whole axis. GnRH is the major regulator in that perspective. And when you say GnRH is regulating, how does it regulate? What does it do? Because GnRH is secreted continuously. These neurons are producing something. So what happens in that regard?
Secretion causes the production of gonadotropin, lectin epithets, which acts on the its receptor to produce the.
So basically, it's the change in the number of pulses which happens. So when I talk about one simple thing, how does puberty start? Or when will you say the puberty starts? What would you say?
So it is characterized by increasing the number of pulses. Basically, the nocturnal pulses generally tend to be at the time of puberty.
So the basic fundamental event that is supposed to start puberty is the increase in nocturnal GnRH pulses. Now, how does it happen? Or why doesn't puberty happen? If you talk about animals, we have talked this earlier also, they are born, they become infant, and then they develop puberty. They don't have any childhood or anything.
It is regulated by the stimulatory and the inhibitory pathways. GABA and
So which is more important?
the inhibitory pathway is more important.
So there is a thought process which is there that if a child develops puberty, he would not go to school, he will not learn, and he'll suddenly become reproductive in that regard. So all the knowledge that humanity has gained over this time will not be passed over to the next generation. So that's why this break has come. Now this break is basically an inhibitory signal which is suppressing. Now inhibition of GnRH can come from two places. One is higher centers in the brain, and second is the androgen levels or the estrogen level. So which is more important?
For the initial higher center, basically the GABA or the negative inhibitor, that is the important.
So if you talk about mini puberty, what happens? If you're born, you've got very high maternal estrogen which is transferred, and that will suppress the gonadotrophins. As soon as that exposure goes, your gonadotrophin starts working and you go into that mode. So you are basically copying other animals who have an immediate puberty. But then something happens. Suddenly it comes down by 6 months of age, and it's that maturity of the inhibitory signals which are there in the brain. So what you need to understand is that the major reason why puberty is not happening is because of those inhibitory signal, and largely GABA, MKRN, there are other things which we'll discuss, but GABA is the major signal. Now, there are also stimulatory signals which are waiting, but the suppressive signals are very strong. They suppress this in that perspective. Now, in that regards, if you have somebody who has got hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, what will be their LH, FSH levels at 4 months, 4 years, 10 years?
So it will be the pre-pubertal range.
In 4 months?
4 months also it will be low in case of hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism.
Okay, and hypergonadotropic hypogonadism?
So hypogonadism, the LSH will generally tend to increase with the age.
So what age it will be high? In mini puberty it will be
Maybe not
very high. Because mini puberty you don't have any suppressive signals. So you will have a menopausal level of LH-FSH which will show there is a gonadal failure. But as soon as your signals mature, they will suppress and your LH-FSH may be normal. Now, as a normal puberty happens, same pattern happens, let's say in somebody with Turner syndrome. You don't have any ovaries, you don't have any suppressive signals, but those suppressive signals are not deciding your LH-FSH rise. So till the time this central inhibition goes, girl with Turner syndrome will have a normal LH-FSH. Or let's put it this way, if you have got a normal FSH before a bone age of 11 years, it can still be hypergonadotropic hypogonadism because the central signals are suppressing. If you have got a normal or a low FSH beyond 13 years of age, 13 years of bone age, let's put it, because that's more relevant, then you definitely have a problem because then your inhibitory signals go off. So what's very important from your perspective is that the inhibitory signals are the major regulator and its removal is what triggers pubertal onset. Yeah. So from this GnRH, you produce LH, which acts on the theca cell to produce androstenedione, which is then aromatized via the granulosa cell to produce estradiol. Now this 2 gonadotrophin, 2 cell, 2 steroid model is basically very good for the initial stage, the follicular initial phase of the cycle where you produce estrogen. But after some time, you've got a lot of confusion which starts happening. LH can also act on the granulosa cell. And this is, I have already said, that after a particular ovarian follicle size, LH starts acting from that perspective. Then progesterone also comes into the picture. So this is basically there for the prepubertal age group, and maybe for the first 7-8 days of the cycle. You can think of this as a simplistic diagram which will work from that perspective. And then estrogen will of course act on the estrogen receptor to cause breast development, all the various factors which will go gradually into these aspects from that regards. Now GnRH is produced in 2 regions. Arcuate nuclei, which is both in boys and girls. This is the major regulator. And from arcuate, it will go to the median eminence. Their neurons will terminate there. And from there, you will be carried through the hypothalamic hypophyseal system to the anterior pituitary, which is the gonadotrophs, where it will start acting. Now, are the gonadotrophs different for LH and FSH? Same. So same cell can produce both? Yes, so this is important. You have got the same controller GnRH, you got the same cells, but why you have different LH and FSH levels?
Because of the pulsatile, higher pulsation level is the LH, and low frequent pulse is the
and the half-life. So this is an important thing which people were very confused. You've got the same cells producing LH and FSH, you've got the same GnRH, then how come FSH is different, LH is different? So as Dr. Prateek has said, the major determinant is the pulse frequency. Faster GnRH pulses, more LH. Slower GnRH pulses, FSH. So what happens in pre-puberty?
So pre-puberty, the increased frequency of pulses are not there.
Slow pulses. And puberty?
Puberty, the pulses start to increase and LH starts.
So high pulses. So in conditions which cause slowing of pulse, you will become prepubertal, FSH predominant. So that is, which conditions this happen? Malnutrition, stress. So all those states will cause decrease in the pulse frequency, while if your pulse frequency becomes more, you become pubertal. So if you think about that, what will estradiol do to this pulse frequency?
So estradiol in females, when it goes up to a level, it will increase the LH pulse frequency. It will increase LH.
That is a positive feedback mechanism, not through the arcuate nucleus. So we'll talk about that later. So normally what happens, androgens will do what?
Will decrease LH.
Okay, we'll discuss about this something now. So basically this is what arcuate nuclei does. It produces GnRH which regulates this pathway. What is important to remember is that there is another nuclei, the AVPV nuclei, which is there in females. And what does the AVPV nuclei do of the GnRH neurons? So this is responsible for the negative feedback. So this is causing the negative suppression. And this negative feedback is mediated via the KNDY neuron or kisspeptin neuron, which we'll discuss later on. AVPV neuron is what you're talking about, is causing the positive feedback. So if your estrogen level goes above 100 picogram per ml and then beyond 200, it will start acting on the AVPV neuron again through kisspeptin. So GnRH neurons, what is unique? Are they exposed to blood?
No, sir, they are not.
They are within the blood-brain barrier. So they have to get connected to other neurons which are actually there outside the blood-brain barrier. And the example for that is the kisspeptin or the KNDY neuron. We'll talk about that later in detail. So in the arcuate nucleus, the kisspeptin will basically mediate the estrogen-androgen effect to cause suppression, while in the AVPV area, it will cause stimulation and the positive feedback. Now, which gender has got a positive feedback? Have you heard of positive feedback anywhere else in endocrinology?
So during the antenatal, the fetal period, increased androgen will cause a positive feedback on LH.
No, that's different. What I'm trying to ask is that this is a very general question. You talk about negative feedback in endocrinology. This is the only site where you talk about positive feedback. And this happens in girls. Why does it not happen in boys?
There's progesterone as well.
Such high estrogen levels in men.
If you give them estrogen, suppose you give some boy estrogen, will it cause a positive feedback? It will start producing more estrogen. Or theoretically, the picture should be you give more androgens, you will produce more androgens. This is what should happen, not just that. So what you're saying is that your normal level is 20, you're going to 200, 300. So it's like a huge increase, not a simple increase. So the reason for that is that if you have got antenatal testosterone exposure, it does two things. First thing is what you were saying, it desensitizes the LH to progesterone response. So what is happening is that if somebody has got a lot of fetal androgen exposure, you will have no response to progesterone, your LH will be high. This is relevant for CAH. In CAH, you will have persistent hyperandrogenism because the LH is high. The second thing is that if you have got very high androgens in the fetal period, like boys, it is going to destroy the AVPV neuron. So in girls, there is no androgen exposure, their AVPV neurons are surviving. In boys, this AVPV neuron goes off. So positive feedback mechanism cannot happen in boys. It only happens in girls. This is an important thing to remember from that perspective. So I think we'll finish off at this point of time on GnRH neuron migration, and then we'll discuss the remaining part later on. So GnRH neuron is different from any other anterior pituitary cell, which we discussed earlier, because they don't form there, they come from outside. So they are developed at the vomeronasal area around the nose from a so it's again a neuroectodermal. Most of them is like this, neuroectodermal tissue, which produce two groups of neurons, the olfactory and the GnRH producing neurons. From here, they have to go through this whole area, base of skull, cribriform plate, and then they have to go to the brain. So this migration process is very important. There are multiple genes which regulate that because the future of humanity depends upon the migration of the GnRH neuron. If the GnRH neurons don't migrate, there will be no humanity. Nobody will be there. How will the reproduction happen? So this is a very, very important chronic biological process, probably as important as glucose, which is for the survival of that individual. This is important for the survival of the whole race. Otherwise, humanity will go. So that's why you will see very interestingly, there are hundreds of genes which will come into the picture here. So what happens here is that these neurons have to be pushed from here to that particular area, starting with FGF receptor, CHD7, SOX10, and all of them will come into when we talk about the disorders in that regards. Now they will then go together to the base, then anosmine, which is the one which is responsible for Kalaman syndrome, will come into the picture. Along with PRKR2 and IGS10, it will then push into the brain. From here, their path will diverge. So defects in any of these genes, theoretically, can cause both problems in GnRH functioning and smell. So that's why anosmia and this combination becomes very important. Now, since anosmine is the major regulator and its defect will 100% cause the problem, and it is a X-linked gene, the defects are much more common. The anosmia is much more common in boys, but it can still happen in girls, and it's very important to understand that anosmia can happen in both boys and girls with hypo in that perspective. From here, the neurons will go to the arcuate nucleus and a bit to the AVPV nucleus in girls as discussed, and then they will grow and start producing GnRH by 15 weeks. Now, all these neurons have got their signaling. If you talk about rainforest, you will know that all the trees are connected with each other. So if one tree is dying, the others will supply them the material. So what happens here is that these neurons simultaneously work like an orchestra. So it's not that one neuron will fire, because then the GnRH will be very minimal. They will produce huge. So this is like a rhythmic thing. So orchestra is like this. You've got low pulse and then it becomes rapid pulse. Rapid means more LH, low means sleep down. Or you want to go back to FSH, the prepubertal stage. This is what happens from that perspective. Now, there are around 10,000 neurons which are there to begin with. Even 10% of that will be enough to start puberty. But whether they are able to sustain puberty is another question in that regards. Now, when you see this many amount of genes, you will remember the glucose situation where you've got 4 hormones to protect. You've got glucagon, epinephrine, cortisol, growth hormone. Here you've got so many genes. What it means is that if one is defective, the other may come up on the picture. And therefore, multiple genes together will act. And if you have defects in many genes, you may have a problem. And this is known as which type of inheritance? Oligogenic inheritance, which is classically reported initially in Bardet-Biedl syndrome. But this also is a very important example of an oligogenic inheritance. The other thing is that the number of neurons required to initiate puberty may be different as compared to sustain puberty. So sometimes if you initiate puberty via testosterone, others will start waking up and they'll say, okay, I'll take over. So milder defects may become reversible over time. Typically, it's the some of these PROKR2 mutations, IGS10, as Naveen was saying, they are milder defects and they can wake up once you get testosterone. So you have to understand that 10-20% may actually be reversible in that perspective. But this understanding of the GnRH migration becomes very important. So we have discussed a bit about these aspects, and from there we'll maybe we'll cover GnRH and then we'll go for the other arts later on. So from here, GnRH is a large molecule produced as a pre-pro GnRH, and from here you have got this 10 peptide GnRH which is produced. There is also a type 2 GnRH which is there, which is produced by a different gene, GnRH2 gene, which acts on a different receptor. It has got nothing to do with puberty. It is basically going to do some role in terms of bonding, which is more important, but not in terms of the actual function. Now, the half-life of GnRH is very low and it hardly goes into the circulation. So when we say all these pulses of GnRH, how do you measure? So either if you do experimental in mice model and all, you will do intraventricular levels, but in humans it's not possible. So what do you do?
So we see the effects of GnRH.
So you look at LH pulses. So LH pulses are a typical indicator of how your GnRH is functioning in that regards. So, and from here the GnRH will start acting. It will act on both LH and FSH to cause impact there. If you have a pulsatile exposure, you will have increased production. But if you have a continuous exposure, you will have a desensitization, and this is the basis of the GnRH analogs we use. The other very important concept is that GnRH will stimulate GnRH receptor. If you have more GnRH receptor. What does it mean, Naveen? So if you have got GnRH, it will build up more receptors. So next response will be? No, flare is different. That is basically when you're giving too much dose. So suppose you have this pulse, suppose you have got this person who has got no GnRH versus this person who has got GnRH. Now, every time you get GnRH, your receptors keep on increasing. So who will be more responsive?
So the 1% was receptor
who had received earlier. So prior exposure sensitizes to subsequent response. Where is it relevant? Clinically or diagnostically? So if you have a person who has permanent HH versus CDGP, who is exposed earlier?
CDGP, GnRH stimulation.
So they will respond to GnRH. So GnRH has got this sensitization phenomena. So if you're not exposed, you will take time. If you keep on exposing, they will respond. But if your GnRH is not there ever, you will not respond. And this makes the basis of the GnRH agonist test to differentiate self-limited form of puberty versus a permanent deficiency. I think this will be the last slide we will go on. So physiological pulses are around 1 to 1.5 hours, which is there. If you have lower pulses, you will have a FSH predominant response and you will go into a shell. You will go into functional or hypothalamic amenorrhea. Too frequent pulses will cause desensitization. And lower pulses favor FSH. Estrogen will increase the frequency of pulses and progesterone will decrease the frequency of